What do you think of the hire?
I love it. I love this hire. And Jesse Minter was the guy that I initially, whenever the Ravens decided to move on from John Harbaugh, he was the guy that I was like, well, that makes a whole lot of sense. You know, he's been in the building, he has familiarity with the organization. And then I was kind of the impression of, okay, well, maybe the Ravens just want to wash themselves of all things Harbaugh and do a total and complete 180, you know, go with a super young offensive mastermind kind of guy, like a Dragon Davis Webb or one of these, a Clint Kubiak. And while I think Clint Kubiak would have been a great hire, and I think that had Jesse Minter gotten a job elsewhere, Kubiak would have been, potentially the next Ravens head coach. But I love this hire for several reasons. One, John Harbaugh is not the caliber of coach and the kind of coach that you want to wash yourself of after you move on from him. John Harbaugh is one of the most well-respected head coaches in the National Football League. He has done so much for this Ravens organization over the last 2 decades. He won a Super Bowl in Baltimore, so it would make sense that the Ravens kind of want to stick with somebody in that tree. Again, like I mentioned, he's been in Baltimore before. He has familiarity with the organization. They know him there. There's a certain level of trust that already exists that you don't normally get whenever you're bringing in a new head coach. And I think a defensive minded head coach, I know a lot of us were thinking, okay, Lamar Jackson, you want an offensive minded guy because we all as a football society are so offensive centric. But the identity of this Baltimore team is and always has been defensive minded. The AFC North as a division is very blue collar, very rough and, physical and tough at the lines of scrimmage. And I look at Jesse Minter's expertise, right? It's in the secondary. Well, they have one of the best defensive backs in the National Football League in Kyle Hamilton. That was the biggest issue and the biggest drop off of this Baltimore Ravens team was on the defensive side of the ball. There was a very clear turning point when you look at the last couple of years with the Ravens organization. Pre Mike McDonald leaving and post Mike McDonald leaving, and it does not look very good for the Ravens post Mike McDonald. So what they're doing and bringing in Jesse Minter is replacing Mike McDonald. It's a very Mike McDonald-esque kind of hire to me. So I love the head coaching hire, but now Fitz, next is the offensive coordinator hire. That might be just as critical as the hiring of Jesse Minter.
You're 1,000% right. And I think that we got a statement from the organization in this too. The organization said, hey, we're going to fix our defense because we believe that Lamar can be flawless no matter what the situation. That's how I'm going to read this because, to your point, one former player and current analyst told me yesterday he believes that Jesse Minter is every bit the savant on the defensive side of the ball that Mike McDonald is. So while we're sitting here getting ready for an NFC championship game and we're constantly saying, look at what Mike does scheme-wise and look at who these Seahawks are, look at how hard they are to defend. I can't believe Baltimore ever let him get out of the building in the first place. All of the things we've said sort of fall into the logic behind Jesse Minter, who is revered by people that study the tape at that same level. So I think on stop here, number one, it's a great hire for Baltimore. But number two, to your point, I think part of what they're saying here is let's fix our weakness because we know our strength is a strength no matter what, and that's Lamar. They do need to figure out the offensive coordinator spot for this. And there's been some conversation. Tom Pelissero saying Joe Brady, potential offensive coordinator candidate for Baltimore as Jesse Minter fills out his staff. Inside Coverage yesterday talked a lot about this. Be sure to go out there and check it out. What do you think of Joe Brady in this situation? And Caroline, I got to be honest, I lean more to Cliff Kingsbury in this offense than I would Joe Brady, but I understand some of the Joe Brady hype.
I do understand the Joe Brady hype and what he can do for this pass game, but I will defer to Lamar. It's the exact same thing that I said about Josh Allen and the Bills organization, that any decision that you make goes through Josh Allen. Any decision that the Ravens make, and I would assume that they kind of, talked to Lamar about the potential hiring of Jesse Minter and that he gave it the thumbs up that they wouldn't have made a head coaching hire without Lamar's approval. I say everything goes through Lamar Jackson. And Diana Russini reported this on the Colin Cowherd's podcast. Diana Russini said that Cliff Kingsbury was the offensive coordinator of choice from Lamar Jackson. Done. That's all I need to hear. Lamar wants Cliff? Okay. Lamar gets Cliff. So that is enough. But then you also look at Cliff's history in working with mobile quarterbacks. It goes back to his time at Texas A&M working with Johnny Manziel. It goes back to his time at Texas Tech working with Patrick Mahomes, his time in Washington with Jaden Daniels. I would think that Cliff Kingsbury was a massive reason why Jaden Daniels didn't have much drop off from the college level to the NFL level, why he was offensive rookie of the year. You look at his 1 year at USC back at the college ranks, he worked with Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy that year. Kyler Murray, obviously, in Arizona. So Cliff Kingsbury has a long history and a long list of quarterbacks that he's worked with that have a very similar skill set to Lamar Jackson. It makes perfect sense to me, Fitz.
Yeah, and look, I think the one part of it is if you want some of these guys, you need to move quickly. Understand that there's a log jam happening right now, sort of like a traffic jam happening when it comes to some of what we're seeing from a hiring standpoint, because so many of the openings are waiting to see what happens throughout the course of this weekend with the championship game so they can get second interviews with some of these coordinators. So knowing that there's been multiple reports that, for example, Davis Dragon Webb, who we've talked a lot about on this show, seems to target Cliff Kingsbury as his preferred offensive coordinator. If you really love Cliff, you better get ahead of it, because if Davis ends up getting a job somewhere, it might be tougher to get Cliff Kingsbury to come to your place instead of where he could go and work with somebody that he actually coached, Davis Webb. So, there are so many elements to this. To me, you're right. Whatever Lamar wants from an offense, Lamar's going to get. I have to believe that Jesse Minter had a great sales pitch and a plan for how to maximize that offense. Every single new head coach does. But this is the thing I tell every single fan base every single year with new coaches when they're hired. When the coach gets hired and you suddenly start hearing, this offensive coordinator, it takes them days and sometimes a week to land their offensive coordinator. That's concern, because understand that part of the hiring process is you come in with a plan and a list of names you think that you can get. So I don't know how deep that list is. I don't know what the intent was, but I know that the one thing you don't want to do through all of this is alienate Lamar even more, just because there's so much stinking noise right now around the Ravens and Lamar. Much of it, I think, unfounded. I'm going to go on the record and say loudly, I think people are just telling you Lamar is going to go somewhere else in a trade because they want the clicks from it. I don't think Lamar is going to go anywhere, but certainly the longer it takes to bring in an offensive coordinator and then what that offensive coordinator wants to do, I feel like it's all going to lead to just blatant speculation out of the gates all over the place. Speaking of offensive minds, by the way, we have some more breaking news this morning as we wake up this morning to news from the Buffalo Bills. They are interviewing Mike McDaniel, former Dolphins head coach, in South Florida today. Now, I want to stress, everybody's confused. They're sitting here saying, wait a minute, didn't you tell us a couple of days ago he's the offensive coordinator for the Chargers? What everybody seems to have missed in that is he has an understanding with the Chargers that if he lands a head coaching gig somewhere else, he's going to take it. And if he doesn't, he's going to become the Chargers offensive coach. So I feel like right now, Mike McDaniel out here doing these interviews, you got to feel like Harbaugh is sitting in L.A. a little bit puckered up, just a little bit. Hey, man, how'd it go? Like, hey, how was the interview? How'd you feel about things? Like, this gets a little weird.
Harbaugh's probably like, do you know how cold it gets in Buffalo? You don't want to go there. And I don't blame him for that. Buffalo, great people, cold city. This is an interesting fit to me, Fitzy. Just culturally, stylistically. Look, offensively, it makes sense. That what was, an issue for the Bills this past year is the weapons around Josh Allen. Well, if you're able to get a little bit more talent in there, let's say you spend your first round pick on a receiver. Well, I believe in Mike McDaniel's ability to make what is already an explosive offense in Buffalo even more explosive. I view Mike McDaniel as one of those extra tools and extra pieces and weapons for Josh Allen to work with, because that's how much I respect him as an offensive mind. But I also view Mike McDaniel as the perfect candidate for one of those guys who is a really good coach, will have a long future in this league, but got let go in his previous position for a reason. He's the perfect candidate for a couple of years of coordinator rehabilitation, as I kind of look at it. Guys that are young, who got fired as head coaches, take a couple of steps back, get out of the limelight as the head coach, cook in your specialty and focus on your side of the ball, And then your coaching candidacy will start to gain even more traction and you'll become even more of a buzzier name next coaching cycle or the year after that. I feel like Mike McDaniel just focusing on being an offensive coordinator for a couple of years, learning under the tutelage of a guy like Jim Harbaugh, who is, coached a lot of football in this league and in college football as well. I just feel like that's better for Mike McDaniel's trajectory rather than stepping into another head coaching job with astronomical expectations.
I'm trying to remember a recent head coach that was fired that was glazed the way we're all glazing Mike McDaniel, to use a term that the kids love to use right now. Like everything that happened in Miami happened under his watch. And that's a part of this that I don't understand. Miami underperformed. Miami had every weapon you could possibly ask for. They gave him everything that he could possibly want to cook with. And I feel like
not a quarterback.
Tua was on him. Tua was on him, on his watch. Tua got paid on Mike McDaniel's watch. And that's my biggest problem with all of this. Like, I feel like at some point we've looked at it and said, yeah, but Tua. Yeah, but, maybe guys just got distracted. Yeah, but, Tyreek became a distraction, or all of these things that we've said over and over and over again. That all happened in his locker room. To me, Mike McDaniel needs to answer how he lost in the locker room. He needs to answer why there were so many reports about players that simply didn't show up or showed up later, slept through meetings. He needs to answer why he essentially lost, to use a college football term, institutional control of his entire organization. Why did he think it was the right move to pay Tua? If he didn't think it was the right move, why didn't he say something? What did he do to work around all of that? Like, the number of things that went wrong with the Dolphins that lie squarely at the feet of Mike McDaniel. And all we keep saying is, yeah, but he's an offensive mind that's so brilliant. Yeah, he's a great offensive coordinator. He was not a great head coach for the Miami Dolphins. I'm sorry. That's just, to me, it's so clear that Mike McDaniel was not a great head coach for the Miami Dolphins. Maybe he gets another opportunity, but if I was interviewing him, I'd want specifics on where he went wrong, not where it went wrong, where he went wrong doing his job. Maybe he has those answers. I look forward to hearing it if he gets another job